Hi
Hi
guys!
guys, welcome back again to the channel. Today we are going to be checking out this video. Please sit back and enjoy. Do not forget to like, subscribe. So let's get right into today's reaction.
These islands in the South Atlantic have two names. To the people who live there and to Britain, they are the Falkland Islands. But to their closest neighbour across the sea, Argentina, and its people, they are Las Islas Malvinas. The debate over what to call these islands is a symbol of a much larger dispute, one that has raged for hundreds of years and continues to this day. But in April of 1982, that debate became a conflict, one which would take the lives of nearly 1,000 people.
Oh,
But for Argentina,
Wait, were they fighting for the island?
yeah, the
Why
Falklands.
do humans fight about every single thing?
Because
it wasn't meant to be
there's a
that.
need in their primordial makeup to just, we're like the soldier ants.
True.
way. In fact, when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, they believed that Britain wouldn't even respond.
Oh.
In this 5-episode series, we're going to take an in-depth look at the Falklands conflict, with individual episodes exploring the fighting at sea, in the air and on land, plus an exploration of how the Falklands conflict impacted the modern world.
Wasn't that serious?
First,
I'm
we
telling
need to
you.
understand why the war happened in the first place. Why did Argentina believe they could take the Falklands without a fight?
Excuse me, I just want to know, the Falkland, was there like people living in it or just a deserted area?
No, there has to be people living in it. That's why the narrator said that they never expected to take it without a fight.
Yeah.
So they feel like the people there are kind of like
Just-
inferior,
Yes.
or they could actually overtake them without the Britain,
Bites.
interfering and stuff like that.
Okay.
Invasion actually like, and why did Britain choose to fight for these islands 8,000 miles from home?
That's a long drive.
Situated in the inhospitable South Atlantic Ocean, the Falklands provide a valuable strategic location to rest and refit. The British first arrived in 1690, but left the islands uninhabited until the late 1700s, when they were occupied at different times by France, Britain and Spain. Britain erected a plaque claiming ownership of the islands, but left a few years later, leaving the Spanish in control, as they were in much of South America.
Oh, wow.
When that Spanish colony fell apart in the early 1800s, Argentina instead lay claim to the islands. But not before, in 1833, British Marines returned to reassert British rule for good.
Okay.
Argentina continued to claim the land, but the Falklands were governed, along with South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, as the Falkland Island dependencies into the 1980s.
About half the population of 1800 live in Stanley, the world's most southerly capital. The remainder live in what is called the camp, comprising sheep farms. The climate, most charitably described as invigorating, is harsh. The people
Penguins.
are all of UK origin, many being the descendants of settlers who first came to the islands over 150 years ago. The
That's a
Queen's
long time.
representative is the governor, appointed from UK. He's the senior civil administrator, to whom the island's elected council is responsible.
So this is the dress uniform of the governor of the Falkland Islands, Rex Hunt, later Sir Rex Hunt. And indeed there are many postings around the world today where diplomatic staff are required to wear ceremonial uniforms exactly like this. It's meant to evoke symbols of power, evoke symbols of control, represented and embodied in the figure of the governor, quite a powerful symbol of both the way in which the islanders saw their relationship to the crown and the way in which the Argentinians viewed the presence of the British as some kind of imperial hangover or legacy.
Since the end of the Second World War, most of the world, including Britain, had been decolonising. The Argentinian government expected the Falklands to pass to their control, as so many other territories had around the world, from former coloniser to former colony. In 1965, the UN issued Resolution 2065, recognising the sovereignty dispute and asking the UK and Argentina to find a peaceful solution. It was a problem that the British government would rather not have had. The Argentinian claim was based both on the idea of territorial integrity, the idea that the islands are part of Argentina's land, and on a sense of injustice, that the British presence was an imperial relic with no place in the modern world.
So what we have here is a letter from the museum's collection. It was sent to the museum, and I suspect there were many sent to other institutions. It lays out the reasons why Argentina have staked their claim. It talks, for example, about Argentina being a self-governing country since 1816. It talks about a constitution, it talks about being a friendly society. And it kind of crystallises that argument with this line. All those countries have asked themselves, how can Great Britain pretend that those islands, 7,000 miles away from Great Britain and so near Argentina, are British? So in theory...
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it because it's way closer to
So the
Argentina.
Argentina, they are trying to possess it because of the proximity it is from.
Yeah.
The proximity of it.
But it still does not make you an owner.
Owner of
That
it.
is close to you because I mean.
Hey.
So that's a lot.
Well, looking at it from the proximity, right, it feels like they are closer than the British.
But that doesn't make you the owner.
Actually,
of
it doesn't. But
But the thing is this, right? It doesn't make them the owner in the sense that, right, the island was uninhabited
Yes,
initially,
nobody.
And
and
the
Britain
Britain
laid
was
covered
claim.
it first.
Do you understand? But left it for the natives initially. I think they said the native Spain or something
yeah,
like that.
Spain, yeah.
So, and you know, when they discovered the island is another party is now laying claim
Claim on it.
to something they gave to someone else, I think they came back to repossess
Yeah.
what they initially,
Gods.
had.
Yeah.
So,
This should be, based on the principle of that claim, relatively straightforward. But of course, it's not straightforward because there is a competing moral claim. And that, of course, comes from the people who actually live there, the islanders themselves.
The Falkland Islanders wanted nothing to do with the proposed decolonisation process for two main reasons. Firstly, they were descended from and saw themselves as British citizens. It was part of their identity. And secondly, no matter how close Argentina was, nor how much they depended on it for supplies and communication, Argentina was not, at that time, an appealing alternative. Since the mid-1970s, Argentina had been led by a right-wing authoritarian government known as the military junta. With the support of successive US governments determined to root out communism in South America, people deemed enemies of the state were treated appallingly. Around 30,000 citizens, known as the Disappeared, were murdered, some of them drugged and thrown into the ocean, in what became known as the Dirty War. Argentina had also come close to war with Chile in a dispute over the Beagle Straits, and as social unrest grew, economic issues developed as well. Suddenly the situation was murky. Britain might once have been an imperial power, but it was now a democracy. And on the other hand, Argentina had shaken off European imperial rule, but it was now a military dictatorship with real issues.
So in the face of all of these problems, one thing is potentially offering itself to the junta as a solution, and that is to focus the attention of the people on a historic injustice. By 1982, the government, the press, the people of Argentina have been describing the Falklands in increasingly desperate terms. One Argentinian general described it as the open wound on Argentina's soul. And if the Falklands to the Argentinian people is a historic injustice, then perhaps that is something that can unify a nation and provide an externally focused way of moving on from the horrors of the Dirty War.
Throughout the 1970s, the British and Argentinian governments continued to negotiate over the Falklands, whether the islanders liked it or not. The British had an economic crisis of their own and were looking for ways to
there is something I actually noticed that he said there. He said whether the islanders like it or not.
Yeah.
But I feel like it depends. It should be the choice of the people or the identity they want to be recognized with.
And in the video, they already said they like the British
Yeah.
identity. They already
So-
Some
identify.
of them are actually descendants, kind of.
Yeah, from the British.
What kind of government rules without the opinion of its people?
They said it was running
Yeah,
a
military
dictatorship.
dictatorship. Yeah.
Precisely.
offload the costs of supporting the islands. Some proposals included a Hong Kong-style deal, which would see the islands transferred to Argentina and then leased back to Britain for a period of time. Another was simply to pay each Falkland Islander to move to New Zealand. but neither of these ever got off the ground. Though there was some distrust between the islanders and the British government, the islanders' lobby in Westminster was strong and ensured that their wishes were never off the table. That meant that the British and Argentinian governments were fundamentally opposed. On one side, a claim based on territorial integrity and a perceived historical injustice, and on the other, a claim based on historical precedent and the rights to self-determination. Their views were simply incompatible. With the Falkland negotiations going nowhere, the British government had few options. They could turn the Falklands into a fortress with an increased military presence and essentially rule out Argentine possession. But it was feared that this would not only be an expensive drain on Britain's forces, which were already committed to NATO, but also that it might provoke the Argentinians into military action. So instead, the British chose to continue negotiating and hope that circumstances would change and things would work themselves out in the future.
But of course, this is all about messages sent and messages received. So with all of these considerations, not just about what the governments of Argentina and Britain say, but what they do becomes increasingly important as each side tries to second guess what the other is about to do. And I think one of the most interesting examples of that deliberation, that dilemma that the British government found itself in, we can see in Hangar 3 here at Duxford.
The signals which Britain sent during the negotiations would eventually convince Argentina to invade the Falklands. Perhaps the clearest was that they were prepared to negotiate at all. It implied that Britain was at least willing to consider transferring
there's a comedy I saw. Somebody, I think one of those chants you saw, that the Argentina were fighting for the Pegues. Oh, Murray.
Yeah.
And saying the Pegues just reminds me of that. So funny.
Islands, despite the feelings of the islanders. The British government position did harden with the election of Margaret Thatcher in 1979, but with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office handling negotiations, those changes took time to filter through. The issues remained as polarising as before. Another clear symbol came from the defences on the Falklands themselves, or the lack thereof. Just 40 Royal Marines defended the islands, and defence cuts were about to make things even worse.
So we're now next to the Westland Wasp helicopter. Now, Wasps were a Royal Navy helicopter that was small enough and agile enough to operate with very limited room, very small hangars, so they folded away quite neatly. If you look at this one, there's the name of its ship on the front, HMS Endurance. So the Royal Navy maintains HMS Endurance for several months a year in the South Atlantic. It's an ice patrol ship, it's like a classic warship, nicknamed the Red Plum because of course it has a bright red hull. And this aircraft in its later career actually served on that in the South Atlantic. You'll be able to see a penguin on the side that references that South Atlantic and Antarctic connection. But that's just one Royal Navy vessel. One Royal Navy vessel that's there for part of the year, not all of the year. When it's decided that it will not survive the next round of defence cuts, that sends a very powerful message that the only ship designed to operate in the South Atlantic for extended periods of time will soon not be there.
Are you a STEM professional and are looking to apply for U.S. permanent residency? Then stay.
For Argentina, it seemed that Britain's commitment to the Falklands was weakening. In 1976, the Argentinians had established a military base on southern Thule in the Sandwich Islands, which Britain owned. But the response had been minimal, as the British were worried about provoking the Argentinians. Then, in March of 1982, things went a step further. When Argentinian scrap metal workers landed on South Georgia to dismantle the old whaling station, they were accompanied by Argentinian Marines who erected an Argentine flag. In response to this direct threat to British sovereignty, HMS Endurance was dispatched with 22 Royal Marines. The flag was taken down, but HMS Endurance was then ordered to hold off. For Britain, the response to all these crises had been proportionate, but to the Argentinians, they appeared token at best. All this pointed to one glaring conclusion, that an invasion of the Falklands would meet no British counter. Signals from around the world were also positive. They had a UN resolution, support from many Latin American nations, and US backing in the fight against communism. And even if the British did respond, taking back the islands over 8,000 miles away from the UK was another matter.
Everything that we've talked about was leading the Argentinian government to assess that the risk of a British retaliation was low. that if they were going to solve the issue of sovereignty, if they were going to come back and attempt to right that wrong of 1833, then this was an ideal time to do it. And to explain what that invasion was like for the people who experienced it, we're going to go back and have a look at a couple of objects.
On the 1st of April 1982, Governor Rex Hunt was informed that an Argentinian invasion was imminent. He had little time to organise a defence. The Royal Marine garrison was actually in the process of changing over, and so was double the usual strength it would normally have been. This was augmented by some naval hydrographers from HMS Endurance and members of the local Falkland Islands Defence Force, bringing the total to around 85 men. Needless to say, this was not enough to repel a full-scale invasion, so the Royal Marines concentrated their defence on Government House. With limited weapons and supplies, they knew they could not hold out for long. Instead, they planned to give the Argentinians a bloody nose and show the world that the Falklands would not give in without a fight. At 11 PM that night, the 1st Argentine Special Forces troops landed at Lake Point and advanced inland. Most of the troops moved to Moody Brook Barracks, which they attacked but found empty, while the rest moved on to Government House, where the main fight would take place.
These are placemats to put under your plates on a table. But these placemats are from Government House in the Falkland Islands. The extraordinary thing about them is that they've been damaged by shrapnel or an Argentinian round. Because when Government House came under attack, there's a crucial thing to remember in that it was made largely out of wood. One of the things that happened was that bullets passed through not just the walls, but the cabinet holding these, and actually damaged them there. Not only did they show the sort of damage that if it was inflicted on a person would kill them, the juxtaposition of these scenes of diplomatic gentility, this sort of 19th century precision and elegance, smashed with a bullet or a piece of shrapnel. These mats are an extraordinary witness to the events of that night.
As the battle for Government House raged on, newly landed Argentinian Amtraks were making their way up from York Bay into Stanley. They were held up by Royal Marines on the main road, but as they advanced on Government House itself, Rex Hunt had a choice to make. One option was to head out into the camp and mount a guerrilla campaign, but in the face of now overwhelming Argentinian force, he made the difficult decision to surrender.
Dear friends, I'm afraid I'm not being given the time to say farewell to you all as I would have wished, but the new Argentine governor has kindly given me permission to send you this last message of good wishes and thanks for all your support. I shall never forget you and hope that we shall meet again someday.
He was repatriated to the UK along with the Royal Marines, wearing the ceremonial uniform which we saw earlier. The following day, after spirited resistance from HMS Endurance's Royal Marines, South Georgia too was captured by the Argentinians at the Battle of Grytviken. When news reached Argentina, the mood was jubilant. Their open wound had finally been sutured. But as the British government reacted, Argentinian assumptions regarding the next phase quickly fell apart.
The decision was taken almost immediately that they would have to be.
The Argentina were the one attacking.
The British are quiet about this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, like they said, right, there is no much defense that was mounted on the place because it is resource draining. So, and again, why the Argentinians actually attacked it? Because they felt like they are closer, and you know, the British will actually look at the expenses in which it will cost them to defend the place, or to take the place back. They might end up not doing anything about it, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
All right, let's see.
A combined land, sea and air campaign that would have to leave as soon as possible. But it still remains the case that to the vast majority of the people in the United Kingdom, the Falklands are not something that is immediately knowable to them. The joke is that many people thought they were off the coast of Scotland. So suddenly to discover not only that these islands exist, but that they have been taken by force, there is predictably a level of outrage.
As Britain readied its task force, the rest of the world reacted to the invasion with shock. The UN issued Resolution 502, calling for an immediate withdrawal of Argentine forces. The US, after attempts to broker a peace, also came down on the side of the UK. They offered arms such as Sidewinder air-to-air missiles and the continued use of Wide Awake airfield on Ascension Island, both of which would prove crucial in the battle to come. And although several Latin American nations voiced approval for Argentina's claim to the islands, Chile did not. The threat of war between the two would keep Argentinian assets tied down on the mainland, while Chilean intelligence would provide early warnings of Argentine air movements and become crucial to the survival of British air crews.
So it's fair to conclude that the response is neither what the Argentinians hoped for, nor in many respects predicted. They wanted Britain not to attempt to retake the islands. They wanted the United States to, if not back them, then at least to remain neutral. And they wanted this to be seen by the wider international community as righting a historical injustice. It's a slightly different prospect, and once again, that spectre of using military force against a people who do not wish to have their government changed begins to enter the calculus of a lot of places around the world.
Though Argentina's moral claim to the Falklands had begun to falter, the basic odds in the coming conflict were still very much in Argentina's favour. They were fighting in their own backyard, close to their lines of supply, while British forces would have to sail over 8,000 miles from home and rely on just 2 aircraft carriers for air cover. To find out how they managed to do it, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our next 4 episodes, where we explore the Falklands conflict on sea, air and land, as well as its far-reaching impacts on the people involved and the modern world.
The Falklands has often been called a small war.
Here.
And that's a bit of a misnomer, maybe, because the Falklands has enormous significance. You don't have to look very far around the world at the moment to see these same issues of historical perceived injustices butting up against the rights of self-determination for people living there now. And of course, this is still a live issue because although the conflict ended, that didn't end Argentina's desire to see the Falkland Islands part of their country, and it did not end Britain's commitment to the islanders. The distance between those 2 points is just as vast. The only difference is Argentina tested the limits of that proposition using military force. And for many people, that crossed a line that can never be uncrossed.
I love the ending words. Many people cross the line they can never uncross.
The truth about the story is that this is the British report, right? This is the British report about the event. And I feel like I cannot even draw a conclusion. I don't even know who really owned the island, because we just saw one aspect of the story saying that, oh, they came to the island so year and then they left it over. We don't know if that is all that there is to the story, because I mean the Argentinians may have a different story why they feel the island belongs to them, why they have to put in so much effort, go all the way out to get the land. So I feel like this is a very big story. We need to really uncover every facet of it.
Well, like you said, it's a one-sided story right now. But one thing that the Argentinians would actually rely more on is the fact of proximity.
Yeah.
And a historical wrong that has been done to them. The question is, what is that historical wrong that they felt has been done to them? You understand? And moreover, how will I put it? I won't actually justify the whole proximity of a thing, because I've seen other countries. Okay, let's look at the Chile they were talking about. They literally share the same border. So if it is by right, they will say that Chile is also theirs.
Yeah.
I don't get where I'm coming from. So 2 countries can exist in the same landmarks and still be different culture, different things. So proximity should not be one of the deciding basis of it. But the reason why I can't draw a conclusion right now is because, like he said, a historical wrong that was done to them. So the question is, what is that historical wrong that was done to them?
And actually, right, because the Falklanders, the Highlanders, they're actually claiming they have British identity. That's another thing on its own. But as you said, it's like one-sided. It's like a group of people saying a particular thing. We actually want to uncover and unfold the whole story from the both parties to actually draw a good conclusion on what really went,
But if you ask me, right, back in those days, right, it was all about the conqueror makes the rule.
Yeah.
So if by a fact that was what it is then, which means the Britons said they saw the land first. They conquered it, they
British
explored it
actually
first.
invaded a lot of countries.
Do you understand? So if you're talking about a now scenario, I'll be like, okay, they did wrong. But back then, it was more of survival of the fittest. So we have to judge based on the rule that was governing then and now.
Okay, we're going to see the end of this.
So that's why every time you see me, I talk when I talk about colonization, I don't really get much angry because then it was survival of the fittest.
Yeah, no, that I know about.
You understand? But if it is done now, I'll be offended. Why? Civilization, modernization has entered into place.
Yeah.
That is my own 2 cents, though.
Let us know what you think about this in the comment section, and we are going to be continuing the series to see how the British actually took a long travel to the Falkland, Argentina, to actually lay their claim to the highland. We'll see you guys in our next one. Do not forget to like, subscribe. Love you guys, and bye.